Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We are back again with King Arthur, Knight's Tale, and this time I want to get into the Black Knight. Obviously, one of my favorite characters in the game. If you've already looked at my top 3 champions list, you know this guy is an absolute beast. Let's go ahead and start with the traits. He has strong, which means he gets an additional 10% HP from armor sigils, and this guy absolutely needs it. A lot of times he's going to be in the thick of things more so than other champions, so it's definitely nice that he has this. He also has Despot. While appointed as Grand Master at the Round Table, he grants an additional 2 loyalty for every Tyrant hero, and this increases by 1 every 10 levels. So this can be really nice if you're having trouble maxing out the loyalty for some of your Tyrant heroes. And then finally, he has Mercenary. The amount of gold found by this hero's party is decreased by 20%. Now, when you first see this, you're probably like, whoa, this guy is never getting a spot on my team. But honestly, gold is really important until you get it to around level 17 or 18. And then not only are you getting the gold that you just happen to find, but you're also going to be able to sell high value equipment that's going to give you a lot of gold as well. So honestly, once you get to the late game, this trait isn't as big of a deal as it seems at first. So what I recommend and what I did is, even though you can pick him up around level 12, I didn't start actually using him until I think around level 16. And that way you can still get some of those extra resources, try to grab some additional upgrades for Camelot, and then bring him on when things are really starting to get real. All right, with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into his abilities. First up is Strike. It's going to do 100% weapon damage to an adjacent enemy. You can upgrade it so that it'll do bleeding, an additional 15% damage. It can reduce your cooldowns every time you kill an enemy with Strike, and it can cause 20% vulnerability. You're going to have to use Strike a lot, so I definitely recommend you get this cooldown, the additional 15%, and the bleeding. That's all going to be useful to you. Whether or not you get the vulnerability, it depends on how you've built the Black Knight. For me, on my Tyrant run, my Black Knight is basically my best damage dealer. So I've given him a lot of the essences that are really going to boost him up, like a chance of doing double damage, more AP, 10% more weapon damage, things of that nature. All of which is to say, I don't bother with the vulnerability because he should be straight up taking out any enemy that he comes across. The bleeding is nice for when you're going up against bosses or mini bosses, but a lot of your other party members more than likely have the ability to put vulnerability on those bosses anyway, so it's questionable whether or not you need to take it here. Depends on your setup. Next up, Leap Attack, a unique ability that only the Black Knight has. The hero jumps to the target, dealing 100% weapon damage to them and 75% weapon damage to units adjacent to them. And you see it now, since the patch, has that area effect tag. So if you get things that improve your ability to do area attacks, it will impact Leap Attack, potentially making it even more powerful. This ability is absolutely beastly. It's one of the most monster abilities in the entire game, because if you jump in the middle of 4 enemies and you kill one of them, you can end up triggering Killing Spree, which you've heard me talk about several times before. When killing a unit, the hero automatically attacks another adjacent enemy with a free strike skill. So if you leap attack into the middle of enemies, you kill one of them, you'll trigger Killing Spree and potentially kill another enemy as well, because you will already weakened it with the damage from leap attack. And sometimes, honestly, I like to choose one of the other characters on my team who is able to do ranged attacks, like maybe Lady Morgause. I might do a chain lightning to a bunch of enemies that I know are going to be in the middle of that leap attack. So that way, when I do my leap attack, it'll kill one of them, weaken the others even more, and then Killing Spree can actually combo off of itself. So if that free strike skill kills an enemy, then he's going to do another strike skill to another adjacent enemy. So you could potentially wipe out 4 enemies, 5 enemies, however many are in a particular area, just by doing one leap attack. And if you combine that with gear and abilities that allow him to gain AP and other things every time he kills an enemy, this guy becomes an all-out monster. And again, he is the only one with leap attack, so he is the only character who's able to pull off a combo of this type. Next up is Cleave, deal 75% weapon damage to every unit in a 3-tile wide area. You can upgrade this where it's going to do 15% more damage, it'll cause enemies to bleed, and it will do 20% damage to whatever character is in the center of this Cleave. I would recommend you go ahead and pick up the 3 of these. You also have the ability to put knockback on the characters you use Cleave on. I don't bother with that because I don't like pushing back characters from my frontline warriors. I want frontline warriors to hold aggro. But there is a case to be made that with the Black Knight, since, as you'll see later on, I'm going to recommend you get Rage, and he just gets so much for being able to kill enemies. There's a case to be made that you want him to be able to roam and pick off weaker enemies and not get tied down with the frontline fighters who are going to run up to him. So if that's more so your play style, you might actually want to go ahead and get knockback. But me personally, I'd rather just deal with the fighters that are in front of me and let the chips fall where they may. Next up is Rage. Gain 10% stackable weapon damage for 2 turns after every kill. So usually when we go over champions, I have you ignore this because just because of my play style, I prefer using active weapon abilities as opposed to buffs that require you to do certain things to trigger them. Black Knight is one of the rare cases where I'd say Rage actually makes a lot of sense. If you're using leap attack right and you have this guy built properly, the amount of times you're going to use something like power attack lessens significantly. So it makes much more sense to take advantage of all the kills that you should be getting. As far as upgrades, you definitely want to take the weapon damage increase. You definitely want Rage to last for an additional turn. You definitely want to gain AP every kill while Rage is active. And you definitely want to gain HP for every kill that you get while Rage is active as well. So I would recommend with the Black Knight, you take Rage and you take all of these upgrades as well. Next up is Juggernaut, which technically is still useful to the Black Knight, even though leap attack is going to jump from a range of 2 to 5 to the specific enemy you want to attack. You have to have line of sight on that enemy, which means if a bunch of your party members are in front of you, it's going to block you potentially from being able to leap attack to a particular enemy, and it has a cooldown of 3 turns. You can, of course, lessen that if you're killing enemies with strike, or if you have somebody on the team who has Inspire, who can lower the cooldowns for all of your abilities. But overall, I would say that you're probably going to have to get used to 3 turns being without leap attack and having to walk up to your enemies, which means Juggernaut is going to be useful to you. Next up is Extra Bleeding, an additional 50% weapon damage for bleeding effects. I'll be honest, I don't think you should bother picking this up. I think Black Knight is going to do a ton of damage on his own, considering if you gear him, if you give him those essences, and if you make sure you get all the upgrades for Rage, I don't think the bleeding effects is going to do all that much for him. It's still kind of worth taking bleeding just to do some additional damage over time if you're facing a really, really tough enemy, especially since Black Knight is kind of squishy. You don't want him to be engaged with enemies for that long, but I just don't think extra bleeding is worth it. Strength gives him an additional 10% more weapon damage. Obviously, this is very, very much so worth it. Next up is Power Attack. You're going to deal 150% weapon damage to an adjacent enemy with 15% armor breaking. This is nice, but it's even better when you combine it with Initiator, which is going to do 25% weapon damage for Power Attack if the targeted unit has full HP and full vitality. This situation of having an armored enemy who has full HP and vitality happens very, very commonly in the game. So consequently, you can get a lot of use out of Power Attack. As far as the other upgrades, you can reduce the AP cost by 1. You can cause 30% vulnerability on the target. We've already had a conversation about vulnerability, so you can decide if this upgrade is actually worth it to you. And you could potentially stun the target, but that would cost 1 additional AP. Whether or not this is worth it depends upon the makeup of your team. You might have allies who can really make use of attacking enemies that are stunned, or you might be playing on a difficulty where it's really, really beneficial to you to have as many enemies stunned, frozen, chilled, etc., as possible. So me playing on normal with no allies that really take advantage of stun, I don't bother getting this upgrade. I find it more advantageous to leave Power Attack at 4 AP and be able to use it more often. But for your particular playstyle and situation, it might make more sense to bring it up to 5 AP so that it can stun enemies. Next up is Earthshaker. It's going to deal 120% weapon damage to a chosen unit and everyone along its path. You absolutely want this. It's the only way most champions have to do ranged attacks. Of course, Black Knight also has leap attack, but that's going to be on cooldown a lot. And just in general, because there are so many enemies in the game, there will be many opportunities where you'll be able to kill 2 or maybe even 3 enemies at one time just by using this. As far as upgrades, you definitely want to increase the tile range. You definitely want to increase the weapon damage. The other 2 are kind of up to you. You have the option to do knockback. We've already talked about knockback. I personally don't do it. Might make sense for you. And you have the option to make enemies slowed. This is another thing that I don't do. I actually want enemies to walk up to the Black Knight because that means he doesn't have to chase them down in order to finally get to them. But for your particular playstyle, you might have allies that take advantage of slow, or enemies might be doing so much damage that you want to delay the time in which they're actually going to be able to close the gap towards you. So you can make your own decision about whether or not this makes sense. Next up, Vengeance. When an enemy hits the hero gains 10% weapon damage against that enemy until the end of the encounter. I would say you definitely want to go ahead and pick this up because it's an easy plus 10% weapon damage against one enemy. So I feel like that's definitely worth it for 2 skill points. As far as its upgrades, the hero gains 2 AP if they have no HP. You all know by now, I do not like abilities that require you to have no HP. That's a terrible situation and makes you very, very vulnerable. You should be avoiding it at all costs. I ignore this. The hero starts their turn with 1 AP if they received at least 2 hits during the enemy turn. This is a little bit better. I personally, again, try to keep my champions kind of out of the way of the real action. But with Black Knight, because he's going to be jumping into mobs of enemies, if he's unable to kill all of them, he's definitely going to take some hits. So there's probably a good case to be made that you should go ahead and pick up this upgrade. And Frenzy, the less HP the hero has, the more weapon damage the hero deals. The hero deals an additional 30% weapon damage with no HP left. I'm kind of in the middle on this ability, to be honest with you. On the one hand, again, the Black Knight probably is going to take some hits, being in the middle of enemies and not wiping them out all in one turn the way he used to be able to. But again, you want to manage things in a way where hopefully he is taking as little damage as possible. So it's really based on your playstyle and how you feel like your encounters are going, whether or not this is actually worth it for your particular character. And finally, the hero gains +2 unbreakable armor while they have no HP. Again, I completely ignore this. We do not plan around no HP. Next up, the hero loses 1 less AP from heavy armor sigils. Definitely pick this up. The more AP the Black Knight has, the better. And then finally, Robust. He gains an additional 10% vitality, HP, and physical debuff resist from accessories, trinkets, and armor sigils. You can make a decision about whether or not this is worth it. I would say probably yes, because again, he's going to be in the mix more than other champions, and a little bit of extra protection isn't going to hurt him, especially since he doesn't have defensive stance or any sort of get out of jail free card for those times when he's surrounded, making him a little bit more sturdy, probably to your advantage. Quick note before we move into the final tier. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate you hitting the like button. I use this information to help me figure out what kind of content the channel is enjoying, and it helps my videos to reach more people. I really appreciate all of the support. Okay, so now we're at the final tier with Blood Hex. Target starts bleeding and deals 30% less damage for 2 turns. I think this is absolutely trash on the Black Knight. He's a champion. He is not using hexes. There are no other hexes here. He doesn't get Master of Hexes or any sort of way to be able to buff this ability. And even though Blood Hex itself is good, I just can't imagine a situation where you're going to want to spend 4 AP to put on Blood Hex instead of using one of your other abilities or using it to move and put yourself in a better position to do damage on the next turn. So I would say ignore this, and of course ignore all of its upgrades. Next up is damage focus. The hero gains an additional 5% weapon damage per unspent AP from the previous turn. Definitely say you want to pick this up. There'll be a lot of different situations where for whatever reason you cannot reach enemies, and therefore you have to bank the AP that you have. As far as upgrades, the hero gains 1 AP per 3 unspent AP left in the previous turn. I would say that's worth it. The hero gains 3% weapon damage per unspent AP left in the previous turn. Again, worth it. The hero gains 2 armor per 3 unspent AP left in the previous turn. You can make a decision about whether or not this is worth it. I usually ignore this. But again, there's always a case to be made for making the Black Knight more sturdy. So it's not a bad skill point spent. You can make your own decision. And then finally, this is absolutely an upgrade that you want to get. In fact, it's the first upgrade you should get on this list. AP spent on Overwatch counts as unspent for the purpose of the damage focus skill. So if you use Overwatch and no enemy comes towards you, you're not able to do an attack. Instead of that AP just being completely wasted, it'll be translated into extra damage for you. Very, very useful. Definitely want to go ahead and pick this up. Next is melee expertise. While outnumbered, the hero gains 1 unbreakable armor and 5 mental debuff resist and physical debuff resist. I already mentioned that you want to pick this up to go ahead and get killing spree, but actually this is a situation where the skill is good on its own. As a champion who's jumping into the fray, you will definitely encounter situations where you are outnumbered, and this will trigger, giving you some additional protection. You can also gain weapon damage for each adjacent enemy. Absolutely think that's worth it for this character. You can start your turn with 1 AP for each adjacent enemy above 2. I think it's questionable how useful this is on the Black Knight, considering the fact that more than likely you're going to want to wipe out all the enemies that are next to him when he gets into these situations. And any enemy that's not wiped out, you probably want to prioritize, because the Black Knight can't take hits the way Sir Mordred can. So the amount of times where he should be surrounded with more than 2 enemies, those should be few and far in between. Not sure this upgrade is really worth it. And then finally, all cooldowns are reduced by 1 turn if the hero starts their turn outnumbered. Once again, I think this is definitely worth it. You will encounter situations where you start the turn outnumbered, and this is going to help you get all of your abilities back faster. Next up, extra stun, an additional 50% efficiency for stun and slow effects. As you can tell from the breakdown that I provided, I don't think you should get this. I don't think the stun and slow effects that he has available are worth picking up, period. And it's definitely not worth trying to make them more efficient. But you can make your own decision for your playstyle. Harden armor, reduce armor loss by 20%. Absolutely, you want to go ahead and pick this up. In fact, there's probably a case that this should be the first thing you pick up when the 3rd tier is unlocked. It's going to really help you to keep the Black Knight on his feet. And then finally, extra area damage, an additional 20% weapon damage for every skill that deals damage in an area. And of course, the Black Knight has Earthshaker, Cleave, and now Leap Attack is counted as an area attack, making this absolutely a must pick up for the Black Knight. And that is my breakdown of the abilities available to the Black Knight. As you can see, he's an awesome character, a lot of offensive firepower and can be a huge boost to just about any team. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like, share this content, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.